17 days and counting before the U.S. has to present its trade deal with Mexico to Congress, and Canada might miss the chance to join. But CBC News has learned the Canadian government isn't necessarily fretting about the October 1st deadline. The CBC's Katie Simpson is here with the details. Hi, Katie.
Hi.
So what are we learning about this timeline?
So we have been talking about timelines for quite a time when it comes to NAFTA. There are two key timelines in play right now. One has to do with December 1st. We're not talking about that one as much. The leaders of Canada, U.S. and Mexico are aiming to stand on a stage together to sign off on on NAFTA before December 1st. Why is that? The new Mexican leader takes office December 1st, and if something isn't signed before that time, the new leader of Mexico will have to sign off on it, and he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to do that. So the U.S. and Mexico are working on a timeline to get to that point for December 1st. One of the legal hurdles they have to cross is on October 1st. They need to have the text of an agreement to American lawmakers for October 1st. And if they don't have it there, they're going to miss that December 1st deadline. Well, senior sources with direct knowledge of the situation have told me that reason to have all three leaders stand together by December 1st, that is not a good enough reason for Canada to rush to a finish, and that Canada is not going to be prepared to accept things it doesn't want to accept just to meet that deadline. So Canada is comfortable with missing that October 1st deadline that is self-imposed or imposed by the Americans. They're comfortable with that. They're prepared to continue talking after October 1st. Whether the Americans and Mexicans are comfortable with that, that's the bigger question. They're both threatening to move on without Canada if they're not prepared to sign off.
So what happens next?
Well, the next big question is, can the Americans and Mexicans move without Canada? Can they do this? And there are big legal questions about whether they can actually do that. And the U.S. Congress plays a big role in that. They're going to have to vote on this, and they're going to be really the ones who decide, okay, yay or nay. And today, the Democratic House leader, Nancy Pelosi, she had some very clear words for what she wants to see happen.
I think it should be trilateral. I don't see how you can say we renegotiated the NAFTA, except we made it bilateral instead of trilateral. So I just don't think that that's in the interest of this hemisphere to be able to prevail in the global marketplace.
Now, Nancy Pelosi is a Democrat, and she is never going to agree anything that Donald Trump says. That is sort of the state of political talks in the U.S. right now. But Donald Trump does need Congress on side to get his version of NAFTA approved. And if the Democrats start making a lot of noise of it and some of the Republicans pick up and say, hey, you know what? NAFTA is a trilateral deal. It's important. All three countries are in there. It could be a problem for Donald Trump. It's just so many questions about the timeline, the legal timeline, what can happen next. It's all very much in flux, but the key takeaway from this today, Canada is not in a rush.
Okay. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
And we will see you a bit later with the power panel. I'm very excited. Thanks a lot. So is a deal still possible after October 1st? And how does Canada get there? Joining me now is Canada's former ambassador to the U.S., Derek Burney. Hi, Mr. Burney. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Vassy.
Thanks for coming back. I want to start off by asking about deadlines. Obviously, we're 2 weeks away from what is supposed to be the deadline to reveal the text of a deal that for sure probably includes Mexico, but maybe not Canada, or maybe Canada. A senior source told my colleague Katie Simpson that the Canadians are comfortable, I'll read the exact, are comfortable with missing that deadline. What do you make of that?
Well, I think one of the problems in the negotiation up until now has been the absence of a very hard deadline. I know that September 30th is the latest of many deadlines that we've had announced on this negotiation. And I know what it's meant to do is to get us to December 1st with something. But, you know, in Washington, it's never over till it's over, and it never really ever gets over. And we're learning that simply by the fact that we're renegotiating an agreement that we thought was well in place, well accepted, doing good things for all three partners. I still believe that's the case. But in any event, I think we're now in a mutual stare-down period where the Canada and the United States, in any event. I mean, it's a very weird negotiation. We tend to know on the surface what the outstanding issues are, but we don't know the nitty-gritty. Mm-hmm. And so what it looks like is that they're having difficulty convincing one another when is the last inch in the negotiation. And nobody wants to give until they know precisely that that's it, because nothing's agreed until everything's agreed. I mean, that's the mantra of the negotiation. So I think we're going to be in a period of, not knowing where we are until we really believe that it is the final time for making a decision. But even then, if they go with a bilateral with Mexico, is Congress going to approve it? We don't know. Congress gave them the authority for a trilateral, after all, not a bilateral. Now they can change that authority. But it's just very difficult to read. I think we know what the major outstanding issues are, and we know that there's a lot of underbrush that's getting cleaned up, but we really don't know whether it's, I guess what I don't know is whether there's any give on the American side. Up until now, this has been a pretty one-sided negotiation, with the Americans saying we want this, 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 and this to Mexico, and doing the same to Canada. There's not a whole lot of evidence to date about what the Americans are giving in order to get.
You have so much experience at the table in negotiations like this, something like this. How unique is the absence of timelines, the way in which it's progressed, the fact that all the major sticking points seemingly are out there? How unique is it based on your experience?
Well, it's unlike the two previous negotiations, and I think it's unlike most of the trade negotiations that I had any, direct or even indirect involvement, like the multilateral rounds. I mean, it's not normal for countries to be negotiating trade in public the way this one has been negotiated in public. Now, it's reassuring in that there's not going to be any surprise at the end of the day, because all we have to do is measure who gave what on which of the outstanding issues. But it's a very different kind of negotiation, because so much of it is being played out in public on a daily basis, and yet so much is still well below the surface. Very hard to read.
Let me ask you about the Mexico aspect of all of this. Yesterday, Mexico's chief negotiator, Kenneth Smith Ramos, tweeted, Mexico stated from the beginning of the negotiation that the ideal scenario is for NAFTA to remain trilateral. We hope the U.S. and Canada will conclude their bilateral negotiations shortly. If that is not possible, we are ready to advance bilaterally with the U.S. That's pretty explicit.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't surprise anybody. I mean, Canadians were always much more willing to carry Mexico's water than I've ever seen evidence of Mexico doing the same for us. But, Vassy, in a trade negotiation, your obligation is to defend and promote the interests of your country. It's not to help somebody else. So I can understand the Mexicans taking the position they're taking. They're softer on dispute settlement. You know why? They lost most of the cases on dispute settlement. We won a lot of cases on dispute settlement. That's why it's more important to us than it is to them. But I understand why they're prepared to concede on something that wasn't really delivering for them, more so than we are.
Does it impact the amount of pressure on the Canadians, or change the game at all for the Canadians now that, although it shouldn't come as a surprise, it is so explicit that they're ready to throw us, for lack of a better term, under the bus?
That good old bus has had many people under it, hasn't it? Well, no, I don't, I think it's a sideshow. I think the real issue is between Canada and the United States. The real issue is dairy, dispute settlement, and although I cannot understand that it's come back, culture. I mean, this was really one that surprises me, because it got nowhere in the initial negotiation or in NAFTA, and I suspect it's not going to go anywhere on this one. But I do think that the crunch issues, the major crunch issues, remain to be dispute settlement and dairy. And as I said earlier, on both cases, Canada is doing the giving. We're not seeing anything coming the other way from the United States. Now, the United States will say, well, yeah, but we've given on the sunset clause. Well, not really, because they introduced the sunset clause. So having agreed to 6 years instead of 5, they think that's a concession. They've got a unilateral definition of concession.
On dairy, on Chapter 19, I'm wondering from when you were sitting at the table, I mean, there's a lot of talk about how will you soften the blow of any concessions made on supply management in Quebec, for example, or with the constituency of farmers that are affected by that. How much thought is given at the table to selling whatever happens domestically once it's all done?
Huge, huge. That has to be the biggest factor of all, because ultimately you have to accept an agreement that you can sell domestically. Mm-hmm. You can't accept an agreement that is one way. Now, the Americans want to change the name of it, I understand. And I've got a good one, because given their tactics to date, I would suggest we change it from NAFTA to SHAFTA. because that's their approach. So that's
I wonder if Donald Trump will go
that's
for that.
why I want our team to hold firm. No, because we're in a mutual stare down situation, as I said right now. Who's going to blink and on what and how much?
Okay, we'll be watching. Thank you, Mr. Burney. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
Thank you.